The morning sun barely touched the edges of Fort Harrison when Captain Sarah Mitchell walked through the gates for what she thought would be just another briefing. She had no idea that this day would change everything. Sarah was 32 years old, lean and strong, with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She came from a small town in Montana called Riverside, where her father had run a hardware store and her mother taught elementary school. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed military hero. But Sarah had always been different. While other girls her age were planning proms, she was planning her future in the Army. She had worked harder than anyone to get where she was. 12 years of service, 2 tours overseas, countless hours of training, studying, pushing herself beyond every limit. She had earned her rank. She had earned respect, or so she thought. The briefing room was cold that morning, not just from the air conditioning. Captain James Garrett stood at the front, arms crossed, his jaw set in that familiar expression of disapproval. He was older, maybe 45, with silver streaking his dark hair. He had been in the service for over 20 years and had a reputation for being old school. Very old school. Around the table sat 6 other officers, all men. Sarah recognized most of them. Lieutenant Mark Brennan, who barely made eye contact with her. Major Tom Rivers, who at least nodded when she entered. And 4 others whose names she knew but whose respect she had never quite earned, no matter how hard she tried. Good, everyone's here, Garrett said, his eyes sliding over Sarah like she was an afterthought. Let's get started. He clicked a remote and the screen behind him lit up with an image of a mountain range. Harsh, snow-covered peaks that looked unforgiving even in a photograph. Gentlemen, he began, and Sarah felt the familiar sting of being invisible. We have a situation. 3 weeks ago, a reconnaissance team was sent into the Cordova Mountains on a classified mission. They were carrying sensitive intelligence and equipment. 4 days ago, we lost contact. The room went silent. Everyone knew what lost contact meant. It was never good. Yesterday, we received a brief signal from their emergency beacon. The team is down. At least 2 members are confirmed KIA. Garrett paused, letting that sink in. But the mission equipment and classified documents are still out there. In enemy territory. Sarah leaned forward. This was serious. This was the kind of mission that could change the course of operations in the region. The objective is simple, Garrett continued. We need a team to go in, retrieve the classified materials, and if possible, bring our people home. All of them. What's the timeline? Major Rivers asked. 48 hours. After that, intelligence suggests enemy forces will have swept the area completely. We'll lose everything. Who's going? Lieutenant Brennan asked. Garrett looked around the room, his eyes moving from one man to the next. I need volunteers. This won't be easy. The terrain is brutal. Sub-zero temperatures, limited visibility, and we'll be going in dark, minimal support. This is a small team operation. 4 people, maybe 5. In and out. Sarah didn't hesitate. I volunteer. The room went quiet. Several men turned to look at her, and not with encouragement. Garrett's expression hardened. Captain Mitchell, he said slowly, like he was talking to a child. This is a high-altitude mountain extraction in hostile territory. It requires extreme physical endurance and— I'm aware of the requirements, sir, Sarah interrupted, keeping her voice level. I have mountain training. I've completed the advanced survival course, and I've been in hostile territory before. This isn't like your previous deployments, Garrett said, his tone dismissive. This is different. Different how? Sarah asked. She knew she was pushing, but she couldn't help it. She had heard this speech before in different words from different men. Garrett exchanged glances with Major Rivers. There was something in that look. Something that made Sarah's stomach tighten. This mission requires someone who can carry 80 pounds of gear up a mountain in sub-zero conditions, Lieutenant Brennan said from across the table. No offense, Captain, but that's not exactly— He trailed off, but everyone knew what he meant. Not exactly what? Sarah pressed. A woman's strength, Garrett finished bluntly. Look, Mitchell, I respect your service. I do, but this is a man's job. We need raw physical power. We need people who can handle the absolute worst conditions without slowing down the team. There it was. The same old story. Sarah had heard it 12 times, 100 times. You're good, but not good enough. You're strong, but not strong enough. You're capable, but this is a man's job. I can carry the weight, Sarah said quietly. I've done it before. In training, maybe, Garrett said. This is real. This is life and death. I can't risk the mission because— Because I'm a woman, Sarah finished for him. Garrett didn't deny it. He just stared at her with those cold, certain eyes. I need 4 volunteers, he said, turning away from her. 4 men who can handle this. Hands went up around the table. Brennan, a captain named Rodriguez. 2 others Sarah didn't know well. Garrett nodded, satisfied. Good, we leave at 600 tomorrow. Briefing at... Sir, I formally request to be included in this mission, Sarah said, standing up. Her chair scraped against the floor. Garrett turned back to her, and now there was real irritation in his face. Request denied, Captain. On what grounds? On the grounds that I'm leading this mission and I decide who goes, Garrett said sharply. You're dismissed. Sarah felt heat rising in her face. Not embarrassment, anger, pure focused anger. But she was a soldier. She knew how to control it. Yes, sir, she said, and walked out. The hallway outside was empty and echoing. Sarah's boots clicked against the tile floor as she walked, her mind racing. She had worked so hard, given so much, and still it wasn't enough. Still, she was being told to sit on the sidelines while men did the real work. She made it to her quarters before she let herself feel it. The frustration, the unfairness of it all. She sat on her bunk and stared at the wall, thinking about her father. He had always told her she could do anything, be anything, that her gender didn't matter if her heart was strong, but out here in the real world it did matter. At least to men like Garrett. Sarah took a deep breath and straightened her shoulders. She wasn't done fighting. Not yet. That evening, Sarah found herself in the base gym, working out her frustration on a punching bag. Each hit was harder than the last, her knuckles stinging even through the wraps. Sweat dripped down her face, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. You're going to break your hands, a voice said from behind her. Sarah turned to see Colonel Patricia Hayes standing in the doorway. Hayes was in her 50s with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen more than most. She was one of the few high-ranking women on the base, and she had a reputation for being tough but fair. Maybe I need to break something, Sarah said. Breathing hard, Hayes walked closer, her expression understanding. I heard about the briefing, of course she had. News traveled fast on a military base. Garrett's old school, Hayes continued. He doesn't mean harm. He just doesn't see past his own experience. That's the problem, Sarah said, unwrapping her hands. Men like him never see past it. I could be the best soldier in this entire base and it wouldn't matter. I'll always be just a woman trying to do a man's job. Hayes was quiet for a moment. Then she said something Sarah didn't expect. So prove him wrong. Sarah looked up. He denied my request. I'm not on the mission. I know, Hayes said. But I also know that Garrett's team is undermanned. 4 people for a mission like that is risky. He should take 5, maybe 6. And I know that Colonel Warren is the final authority on mission personnel, not Garrett. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. You think Warren would override him? I think Warren cares about mission success more than egos, Hayes said. And I think if someone presented him with a solid case for why a 5th team member with your qualifications was necessary, he might listen. Hope flickered in Sarah's chest, but she kept it guarded. Garrett would fight it. Let him, Hayes said. You've spent your whole career fighting to be here. Don't stop now. That night Sarah barely slept. She spent hours preparing her case, pulling up her records, her qualifications, every piece of evidence that showed she could handle this mission. By the time the sun rose, she had a file 2 inches thick. At a 700, she was standing outside Colonel Warren's office. His assistant, a young corporal, looked nervous. Captain, do you have an appointment? No, Sarah said. But I need 5 minutes of the colonel's time. It's urgent. The corporal disappeared inside and Sarah waited, her heart pounding. She had never gone over a superior's head like this before. It was risky. It could damage her career. But staying silent felt like a bigger risk to who she was. The door opened. He'll see you, the corporal said. Colonel Warren was a bear of a man, tall and broad-shouldered with a gray beard and sharp eyes. He looked up from his desk as Sarah entered and saluted. Captain Mitchell, he said, I hear you have something urgent to discuss. Yes, sir. It's about the extraction mission to the Cordova Mountains. Warren leaned back in his chair. Go on. Sarah took a breath and launched into her presentation. She laid out her qualifications, her experience, her mountain training. She explained why a 5-person team was strategically better than 4. She showed her physical fitness scores, her marksmanship records, her survival training certifications. She didn't mention Garrett's bias. She didn't have to. The facts spoke for themselves. When she finished, Warren was silent for a long moment. "Captain Garrett didn't include you on his team," he finally said. "No, sir." "Do you know why?" Sarah met his eyes. "I believe he doesn't think a woman can handle the physical demands of the mission, sir." Warren nodded slowly. "And you disagree?" "I know I can handle it, sir. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking for the chance to serve." Another long silence. Then Warren picked up his phone. "Get me Captain Garrett," he said. 5 minutes later, Garrett was in the office, his face tight with surprise at seeing Sarah there. "Captain Garrett," Warren said, "I'm adding Captain Mitchell to your mission team." Garrett's jaw clenched. "Sir, with respect, I don't think—" "I wasn't asking for your opinion," Warren interrupted. "I've reviewed her file. She's qualified. And a 5-person team gives you better odds." She goes, "Colonel, this mission is too important to risk on—" "On what?" Warren's voice was sharp now. "On one of our most decorated junior officers? On someone who has consistently exceeded standards in every measure?" "Finish that sentence, Captain." Garrett went quiet. Sarah could see the anger simmering behind his eyes, but he was too much of a soldier to argue further. "Yes, sir," he finally said. "Good, dismissed, both of you." In the hallway, Garrett turned to Sarah. His face was stone. "You may have gotten yourself on this team, Captain," he said quietly, "but don't expect any special treatment. You keep up or you get left behind. And if you compromise this mission in any way, that's on you." "I won't slow you down, sir," Sarah said. "We'll see," Garrett said, and walked away. Sarah returned to her quarters to pack. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From determination. She had her chance. Now she had to prove she deserved it. The next morning at 600, Sarah stood on the tarmac with the rest of the team. The sky was still dark, stars fading as dawn approached. Garrett was there, along with Lieutenant Brennan, Captain Rodriguez, and 2 others. Sergeant First Class Mike Davis and Staff Sergeant John Cole. All experienced. All strong. All watching her with varying degrees of skepticism. "Listen up," Garrett said as they loaded into the transport helicopter. "This mission is straightforward. We insert here," he pointed to a map, "and hike 12 miles up the mountain to the last known location of the recon team. We retrieve the classified materials and any remains we can safely transport. Then we extract from this secondary location. Total time on ground, 18 hours, maybe less if conditions are good." "And if we run into enemy forces?" Rodriguez asked. "We avoid engagement if possible," Garrett said. "We're not there to fight. We're there to retrieve and return. Speed and stealth." He looked directly at Sarah when he said that last part, like he was emphasizing that she needed to keep up. The flight was long and cold. They flew low under radar through mountain passes that made Sarah's stomach drop. But she kept her face calm, her breathing steady. She wouldn't give anyone a reason to doubt her. When they finally landed, the cold hit like a wall. Sub-zero temperatures, just like Garrett had said. The wind cut through even the best gear. Sarah pulled her mask up and checked her pack. 85 pounds, including her weapon, ammunition, survival gear, and her share of the recovery equipment. "Move out," Garrett ordered. They began the hike. The terrain was brutal. Snow up to their knees in places. Ice hidden under deceptive surfaces. The altitude made every breath feel thin. Sarah's legs burned within the first hour, but she didn't slow down. She kept pace with Brennan, who was in front of her, matching him step for step. Behind her, she could hear Davis and Cole talking quietly. She couldn't make out the words, but she heard the tone. Doubt. They were waiting for her to fail. Hour 3. The slope got steeper. They were climbing now, using ropes in some sections. Sarah's shoulders ached from the pack weight, but she pushed through it. This was exactly what she had trained for. "Water break," Garrett called at hour 4. Everyone dropped their packs. Sarah noticed Brennan and Rodriguez both stretching their shoulders, faces showing the strain. She was tired too, but she kept it hidden. She drank her water, checked her gear, and was ready before anyone else. Garrett noticed. He didn't say anything, but something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, not yet, but maybe a fraction less doubt. "Let's move," he said. By hour 8, they reached the coordinates. The site was devastating. The remains of a camp torn apart by weather or by violence, maybe both. Equipment was scattered. And there, partially covered by snow, were 2 bodies. "Spread out," Garrett ordered quietly. "Find the materials. Carefully." They searched in silence, the only sound the wind howling through the peaks. Sarah moved methodically, checking every piece of debris, and then she saw it, a sealed case half buried under snow and rock. "Sir," she called, "I've got something." Garrett came over and together they dug it out. The case was intact, locked and sealed. Exactly what they were looking for. "Good work," Garrett said. It was the first positive thing he had said to her, but their relief was short-lived, because that's when they heard it. Voices. Distant but getting closer, enemy patrol. "Everyone down," Garrett hissed. "Now." The team dropped behind cover, pressing themselves into the snow and rocks. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest, but her hands were steady on her rifle. Through the swirling snow she could make out movement. 4 figures, maybe 5, working their way up the mountain from the east. They were armed and moving with purpose. "They're sweeping the area," Rodriguez whispered. "They know we're here." "We can't engage," Garrett said quietly. "Not unless we have no choice. We need to move now." But there was a problem. They were pinned. The enemy patrol was coming from the direction of their planned extraction point, and behind them was nothing but a steep cliff face and unstable ground. "We have to go around," Brennan said, studying the terrain. "Circle back west, find another route down." "That adds 4 hours to our timeline," Davis said. "Maybe more in this weather." "We don't have another choice," Garrett said. He looked at the sealed case Sarah had found, then at the 2 bodies of their fallen soldiers lying in the snow. His jaw tightened. "We take the case. We can't carry the bodies without slowing down too much. We'll mark the location and come back for them." Sarah saw the pain in his face as he said it. No soldier wanted to leave their brothers behind. But sometimes survival meant making impossible choices. "Sarah," Garrett said, and it was the first time he had used her first name. "You're the lightest and the best climber. I need you on point. Find us a route west that won't get us killed." It wasn't a request. It was trust. Hard-earned and unexpected. "Yes, sir," Sarah said. She moved forward carefully, testing each step. The ground here was treacherous, ice hidden under fresh snow. One wrong move could send someone over the edge. But Sarah had trained for this. She had spent summers climbing in Montana, winter months in Colorado during survival courses. She knew how to read terrain, how to feel for stable ground. "Here," she called back softly. "There's a ledge. Narrow, but it'll hold us." One by one, the team followed her lead. Sarah went first, pressing herself against the rock face, moving sideways along a ledge that was barely 18 inches wide. 85 pounds of gear on her back, a drop of several hundred feet to her right and enemy soldiers somewhere behind them. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "You can do anything, Sarah, just keep moving forward." She kept moving. Behind her, she heard Brennan's breathing, quick and shallow. He was scared. They all were. But fear was just another thing you pushed through. 20 minutes of careful, agonizing movement, and they reached safer ground. A narrow valley that curved west, giving them cover from the patrol and a route down the mountain. "Good work, Captain," Garrett said to Sarah. There was no grudging tone now. Just fact, they moved fast through the valley, but the weather was turning. The wind picked up, driving snow into their faces so hard it was like being sandblasted. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. "We need shelter," Cole shouted over the wind. "We can't navigate in this." Garrett knew he was right. They found an outcropping of rocks that provided minimal cover and huddled together, sharing body heat. The temperature was dropping fast. Dangerous fast. Sarah checked her watch. They had been on the ground for 11 hours. They should have been halfway to the extraction point by now. Instead, they were pinned down by weather with enemy forces somewhere behind them and 7 more hours until their pickup window even opened. "We'll wait it out," Garrett said. 2 hours, maybe 3. The storm should pass. But Sarah could see the worry in his face. They all knew what happened to people caught in mountains during storms like this. Hypothermia, frostbite, death. They rationed water and energy bars, keeping their bodies fueled. Sarah sat next to Rodriguez, both of them pressed against the rock for warmth. "You did good back there," Rodriguez said quietly. "On the ledge. I don't think anyone else could have found that route." "Just doing my job," Sarah said. "Yeah, well," Rodriguez said. "I owe you an apology. I didn't think you should be here." "I was wrong." Sarah looked at him, surprised. "Thanks," she said. An hour into their wait, Davis started shaking. Not from cold, though it was freezing. From something else, Davis. Cole moved closer to his friend. "Talk to me, man." "Can't feel my feet," Davis said through chattering teeth. "Hands either." Garrett and Sarah immediately moved to help. They pulled off Davis's gloves and boots as carefully as they could. His fingers were white. His toes were worse. Frostbite, Garrett said grimly. We need to warm him up, carefully. They wrapped Davis in emergency blankets, packed heat warmers around his hands and feet. But Sarah could see it was bad. Davis needed medical attention. Real medical attention soon. We have to move, Sarah said. He won't make it if we wait. We can't navigate in this storm, Brennan said. Then we go slow, Sarah said. But we go. Because staying here he dies. Garrett looked at Davis, then at the storm raging outside their shelter, then at Sarah. Can you navigate us out? He asked her. It was a massive question. Lives hung on her answer. The mission hung on her answer. Yes, Sarah said. Because she had to. Because there was no other choice. They packed up, supporting Davis between Brennan and Cole. Sarah took point again, using her compass and her instincts to guide them. The storm was blinding, the cold was brutal, but she kept moving, step by step, yard by yard. Twice she stopped them just before they would have walked over hidden crevasses. Once she found a path around an ice field that would have been impossible to cross. She didn't know how she knew. Maybe it was training. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was pure determination. Hour after hour they moved through the storm. Davis was fading. They all were. Sarah's body screamed for rest, for warmth, for this to be over. But she pushed through it. She had to prove she belonged here. More than that, she had to save her team. When the storm finally broke, they were 3 miles from the extraction point. The sky cleared to reveal stars and a moon that lit the snow like daylight. There, Rodriguez said, pointing. I can see the valley. We're close. They picked up the pace, half carrying Davis now. Sarah's legs felt like lead. Her shoulders were raw from the pack straps, but she didn't slow down. At hour 17, they reached the extraction point. Sarah immediately radioed for the helicopter. This is Falcon Team. We are at extraction point Beta. We have one critical medical case. Request immediate pickup, the response crackled back. Falcon Team, we read you. Inbound ETA 12 minutes. Those 12 minutes felt like hours. They stabilized Davis as best they could, keeping him warm, keeping him conscious. And then finally they heard the beautiful sound of helicopter blades cutting through the night air. The bird landed. Medics rushed out to take Davis. The rest of the team loaded up. Along with the case of classified materials, they had risked everything to retrieve. As the helicopter lifted off, Sarah looked down at the mountain below them. They had made it. Against the odds, against the weather, against everything, they had made it. Garrett sat across from her, his face exhausted, but something else too. Respect. You saved us out there. Captain, he said, loud enough that everyone could hear over the engine noise. I was wrong about you. Dead wrong. I'm sorry, Sarah nodded. She didn't need his apology, but she appreciated it. We saved each other, she said. That's what teams do. The helicopter touched down at Fort Harrison just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Medical personnel rushed to get Davis to the hospital. The rest of the team was exhausted, running on nothing but adrenaline and the relief of being home. But as Sarah climbed out of the helicopter, she saw something that made her stop. There were people waiting. Lots of people. Officers, enlisted personnel, support staff. And at the front of the crowd was Colonel Warren, along with Colonel Hayes and several other high-ranking officials. What's going on? Sarah asked. Garrett looked just as confused as she felt. Warren stepped forward, his expression serious. Captain Garrett. Captain Mitchell. A word, please. They followed him to a briefing room, the rest of the team trailing behind. Sarah's mind raced. Had something gone wrong? Had they missed something in the mission? Inside the briefing room, Warren turned to face them. The materials you recovered, he said, were more important than you knew. That sealed case contained intelligence that has prevented a major attack on U.S. forces. Lives have been saved because of what you did out there. Hundreds of lives. Sarah felt the weight of that settle over her. They had known the mission was important, but not that important. But that's not why I called you here, Warren continued. He looked directly at Sarah now. Captain Mitchell, I've received reports from your team leader about your actions during the mission. Captain Garrett? Garrett stepped forward. He looked at Sarah, and there was no trace of the skepticism or dismissal that had been there before. Sir, Garrett began, his voice formal but sincere. Captain Mitchell displayed exceptional leadership, navigation skills, and courage under extreme conditions. She found routes that saved the team when we were pinned down. She navigated us through a whiteout storm when any other choice would have meant casualties. And she did all of this while carrying the same load as every other team member, without complaint and without failure. He paused. She didn't just prove she could do this job. She proved she was the best person for it. I formally recommend her for commendation. The room was silent. Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion, but she kept her composure. Recommendation noted, Warren said, but there's something else. He picked up a folder from the desk. 2 days from now, we are holding a ceremony. We're honoring the soldiers who died on that mountain, the ones whose sacrifice made this intelligence possible. It's a full military funeral with honors, and someone needs to carry the flag. Sarah's heart began to pound. She knew what carrying the flag meant. It was one of the highest honors in a military ceremony. The flag bearer led the procession, representing the service, sacrifice, and honor of fallen soldiers. Traditionally, Warren continued, this duty goes to the senior-most member of the recovery team. But Captain Garrett has made a specific request. He looked at Garrett. I've requested that Captain Mitchell carry the flag, Garrett said. Those men died serving this country. Captain Mitchell risked everything to honor their sacrifice by completing the mission. She should be the one to lead them home. Sarah couldn't speak. Emotion overwhelmed her. Gratitude, pride, a sense of finally being seen for who she really was. Captain Mitchell, Warren said, do you accept? Yes, sir, Sarah managed. It would be an honor. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah practiced the ceremonial movements, perfected her uniform, and tried to process everything that had happened. The story had spread throughout the base. The mission, the storm, the navigation that saved lives. Everywhere she went, people looked at her differently now, but not everyone was happy. On the morning of the ceremony, Sarah was in the locker room, putting the final touches on her dress uniform, when 3 women approached her. They were younger soldiers, enlisted, their faces a mixture of awe and hope. Captain Mitchell, one of them said nervously. We just wanted to say, thank you. Sarah looked up surprised. For what? For showing us it's possible, another one said. We've all been told at some point that we couldn't do something because we're women, that some jobs weren't for us. But you proved them wrong. You proved that we belong here too. The third woman added, you're carrying the flag today. You're going to be in front of everyone, showing them what we can do. That means everything to us. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. Listen, she said softly. I didn't do anything you couldn't do. The only difference is I refuse to quit. Whatever they tell you that you can't do, don't believe them. Push forward. Prove them wrong. And when they try to stop you, push harder. The women nodded, their faces determined, and left. Sarah finished dressing, her heart full of purpose. The ceremony began at 1400 hours. The base parade ground was filled with people. Soldiers in dress uniform, families of the fallen, dignitaries, and press. At the front were 2 flag-draped caskets. They had gone back for the bodies, recovered them from the mountain. Sarah stood at attention, the American flag in her hands, folded precisely and held against her chest. The weight of it was more than physical. It represented everything those men had died for. Everything she had fought for. Freedom, honor, the right to serve. The command was given. Present arms. Sarah stepped forward and began the slow, measured walk across the parade ground. Every eye was on her. Every camera. She was aware of it all, but her focus was absolute. Left foot, right foot, steady and strong. The flag held high. She thought about the mountain. About the cold and the fear and the moment when she could have given up. About every time someone had told her she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't man enough for this job. And she thought about these 2 soldiers who had given their lives. They deserved honor. They deserved respect. And they deserved someone who understood sacrifice to bring them home. Sarah reached the front of the assembly and presented the flag to Colonel Warren, who accepted it with a salute. Then she stepped back and stood at attention as the ceremony continued. Prayers were said. Words were spoken about courage and duty and sacrifice. But the image everyone would remember, the image that would appear in newspapers and on news broadcasts across the country, was Captain Sarah Mitchell walking across that parade ground, carrying the flag. After the ceremony, as people dispersed, Garrett approached Sarah. You did well today, he said. You've done well through all of this. Thank you, sir, Sarah said. Garrett hesitated, then continued. I need to tell you something. I've been in the Army for 23 years. I thought I knew what made a good soldier. Strength, endurance, the ability to power through anything. He paused. But you taught me something. Being a good soldier isn't just about physical strength. It's about heart. It's about refusing to quit when everything says you should. It's about caring enough about the mission and your team to give everything you have. He met her eyes. You have all of that, and I was a fool not to see it from the start. We all have our blind spots, Sarah said. What matters is that we learn. Garrett nodded. I'm putting in for a transfer, he said. I've been offered a position at the training command. They want me to redesign some of the selection protocols. He smiled slightly. I think I'm going to recommend that they stop asking if someone can do the job and start proving whether they can, no matter who they are. That sounds like a good change, Sarah said. As Garrett walked away, Colonel Hayes approached, a rare smile on her face. Quite a day. Captain, she said. Yes, ma'am, Sarah agreed. You know, when I first joined the Army, there were people who told me I'd never make it. That command positions weren't for women, that we should stick to support roles. Hayes looked out at the parade ground where the ceremony had taken place. I've spent my career proving them wrong, but I've always done it quietly by the book, trying not to make waves. She looked back at Sarah. You did it differently. You made waves. You demanded your place, and you proved beyond any doubt that you deserve it. I just did my job, Sarah said. No, Hayes said firmly. You did more than that. You carried the flag, Sarah, literally and figuratively. You carried it for every woman who's ever been told she can't. That's not just doing your job. That's changing the world. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters, exhausted but at peace. She sat on her bunk and pulled out her phone. There was a message from her mother. We saw you on the news. Your father and I are so proud. He always said you'd do great things. He was right. Love you, sweetheart. Sarah smiled and typed back a simple response. Love you too, Mom. She lay back on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, and let herself feel it all. The exhaustion, the pride, the satisfaction of knowing that she had fought for her place and won it. They had called it a man's job, until she came back carrying the flag. And now, no one would ever call it that again. 3 months later, Sarah received new orders. She was being promoted to major and transferred to the Special Operations Training Center, where she would help develop and implement new standards for mountain and cold weather operations. Her expertise, proven on that mountain, would now be used to train the next generation of soldiers, male and female. Because if Captain Sarah Mitchell, now Major Mitchell, had proven anything, it was this: courage, skill, and determination had no gender. The only thing that mattered was the strength of your heart and your refusal to quit. As she packed her belongings for the transfer, Sarah found the newspaper clipping her mother had sent her. The photo from the ceremony, her walking across the parade ground, the flag in her hands, her face set with determination and honor. Underneath, her mother had written in neat handwriting, "You didn't just carry the flag. You became it." Sarah folded the clipping carefully and tucked it into her pocket. Then she shouldered her pack, walked out into the morning sun, and headed toward whatever challenge came next. Because that's what she did. That's what she would always do. She was a soldier. And nothing, not doubt, not prejudice, not anyone's limited imagination of what she could or couldn't do, would ever change that.